Meanwhile, China is claiming Taiwan's president, quote, brought danger to Taiwan and is pushing the nation into stormy seas following her meeting with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy last week. Beijing still conducting military exercises around Taiwan, despite announcing the end of its three-day drill on Monday. Here's Taiwan's foreign minister and what he said about those drills yesterday.
Look at the military exercises and also their rhetoric. They seem to be trying to get ready to launch a war against Taiwan. The Taiwanese government look at the Chinese military threat as something that cannot be accepted, and we condemn it.
Joining me right now is Wisconsin Congressman, House Intelligence Committee member, and Chairman of the House Select Committee on China, Mike Gallagher, is here. Congressman, Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Are you expecting a response from China, a retaliatory move on the heels of the House Speaker's meeting with the president of Taiwan?
Well, it's clear right now they're trying to intimidate us. More than that, they're trying to intimidate the people of Taiwan. Their real goal is to influence the upcoming Taiwanese election in January of 2024. It's clear the Chinese Communist Party would prefer that the KMT win and that President Tsai's party, the DPP, lose. So this is really a form of cognitive warfare. That's a phrase that President Tsai uses repeatedly. She talked about that to us, the bipartisan delegation that met her in California. It's important that we should not be intimidated. Right now, they've done a few exercises around Taiwan. They've threatened to start boarding shipping vessels bound for Taiwan. That would really amount to a virtual blockade. That would be a massive escalation. And so we should communicate in no uncertain terms that we want to abide by that. And again, this is all an intimidation, bullying tactic designed to make us afraid and get us to back down. And who the democratically elected leader of Taiwan meets with on American soil, it's quite honestly no business of the Chinese Communist Party.
But, Congressman, you have identified so much in terms of provocation from Communist China. You're doing a great job leading this committee, and a lot of people have confidence that you are actually going to move the needle here. But what about corporate America? I know you've been meeting with CEOs. You continue those meetings. Do you believe scores of millions of American retail investors should be funding some 5,000 CCP-controlled companies traded in our capital markets, including egregious corporate human rights abusers? We know these companies are in all of the indexes, and investors are inadvertently funding the expansion of the Communist Party.
The short answer is no. And you have great people like Roger Robinson, who, was at the heart of Reagan's economic warfare strategy, that have talked and written extensively about this, that we hope to feature on the committee. I think there are some areas that we can prioritize right away. For example, we as a committee went out to Silicon Valley and we talked with major tech executives. Nobody was able to defend the idea that, a VC fund like Sequoia should be able to invest in Baidu or other Chinese AI champions. We shouldn't be funding our own loss in this AI race, which has a massive implication for the future of geopolitics in the 21st century. That, to me, is low-hanging fruit. That's easy. And I left this trip even more convinced that we can put sensible guardrails in terms of the outflow of U.S. capital to China to ensure that we are neither funding genocide nor our own destruction. That, to me, is the framework that Republicans and Democrats can get behind. And it's time that we stop just pouring U.S. money into suspect Chinese companies.
Well, I mean, look, the tone is set from the top, right? I've spoken with Jamie Dimon about this, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, and he said, look, we're going to do everything that the law allows. Did you feel after meeting with companies and investors in China that they get it, that they actually recognize the national security issues that you're raising? That's not just economic.
I think there's a tendency to discount the likelihood that Xi Jinping, for example, would invade Taiwan. It's interesting, particularly those tech executives and investors who have met Xi repeatedly. For whatever reason, they think that it's unthinkable he would do something. I obviously disagree with that. However, and this gives me some hope, I don't think they can deny the political reality in Washington, D.C., which is to say this isn't just hawkish Republican Mike Gallagher saying, uh-oh, there's a higher risk of war. It is now the bipartisan consensus that says the CCP is threatening a democratic society in Taiwan. They're threatening to start World War III, and we should be under no delusions about who Xi Jinping is and the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. So I think they're grappling, albeit grudgingly, with the new political reality in Washington, D.C. And as long as we set big, bright lines and have a sufficient transition period for economic and technological decoupling, I think these companies can change the way they do business.
Well, but look at all of this time that this White House is wasting and what they're allowing China to do. I mean, Brazil's president, Lula, is now headed to China. He's going there for a 2-day state visit, meeting with Xi Jinping to discuss the war in Ukraine and trade. They've already discussed and struck a deal last month to ditch the U.S. dollar and trade in their own currencies. Congressman, the same with the Saudis. The Saudis are going to now transact oil deals with China in the yuan. Are we losing the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency? Do you worry about that?
I do worry about that. We did an extended session on this during our trip out to California and just sort of the nature of cryptocurrency as well. And that remains a concern. I think the CCP has a concerted strategy to de-dollarize the global economy. When it comes to countries like Saudi Arabia, I would just say this is a lesson in what happens when you ostracize and insult your traditional allies. We don't have to agree with Saudi Arabia on anything, but the only way to make sense of the Middle East is to build upon the historic cooperation we're seeing between Israel and the Sunni Arab Gulf states, foremost among them Saudi Arabia. And the Biden administration has really undermined that foundation that the Trump administration laid with the Abraham Accords. And now we're seeing the consequences in terms of the intensifying relationship between Saudi Arabia and China. That's a massive problem for American national security and diplomacy.
It sounds like it. Congressman, real quick before you go, the last time you were with me on this program, you said 2024 could be the year when China tries to invade Taiwan. You still believe that?
I do. I think the Taiwanese elections in January of 2024 are kind of the start of the window of maximum danger. And then, of course, we have our own presidential election in 2024. We're going to be kind of internally distracted, let's say. And so I really worry about that year. And also, I think the Biden administration's foreign policy has not been strong. And particularly, we've seen a deterrence failure in Ukraine. I worry we're not learning the right lessons and applying those to Taiwan.
Congressman, we'll be watching your work, as is everyone. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Maria.
All right, Mike Gallagher.